yeah, and
And
they'd come
then,
in with no
yeah, I didn't think you
intention.
mentioned the dude.
Yeah, they had no intention of getting to any expanded state. That wasn't the motivation at all. When you're in the early stages of the enticing story of this, the enticing siren call of desire with your fantasies, it doesn't feel holy at all. It doesn't feel anything like that end state that we got to. It just feels taboo or naughty or exciting or any of those feelings. It doesn't. It feels like the opposite to these expanded states that people call spiritual states. And yet the story gently moves you along to that state. And by the time you get to the end, I can remember lying on the floor with clients. We're covered in all sorts of lube and just mess everywhere. And by the end, we're lying there and we can't even, it's just our hearts are expanded. We can't even remember why we wanted to do the smut in the first place, even though we literally just finished doing it. And but we've now dropped so deeply into this other state that it's taken us to that we're thinking differently again. We're experiencing ourselves and everything else differently again. But it was the smut that got us there. So, and they would say to me things like, "Wow, I had no idea I could feel this way. This is what I've been searching for my whole life. This feels like I'm on ecstasy and tripping at the same time, but I haven't taken any drugs, and it feels as though I am the most grounded and present I've ever been. This feels like this feels like I'm a real I'm whole now." And these are people who just came in with the attitude of, "Do you taken up the shit I love?" at the beginning of the story. So if you follow, and I'm not saying that happened every time because that's ridiculous. It doesn't. But and you don't necessarily even want to aim for that. That becomes goal oriented, and it's a ridiculous thing to do. But it does shift you from this eye cut off, separate, walls up state to all the walls dropped, and now there's a possibility of connection with somebody else. Then, if you go even further, there's a connection with possibly even the land itself and the sky and life itself, and this feeling of being oneness, those oneness feelings. And they happen sometimes. But I don't encourage anyone to be goal oriented in it. I just say, let's see what your fantasies have brought to the table, because they know, they have their own wisdom. They're geniuses at changing your internal state. They're absolutely rubbish at giving you instructions of how to behave literally in the outside world. Don't believe them for that. But they are brilliant for changing your internal state of consciousness. And in the consensual container of play, that's where you can find their magic.
So on that note, I'm curious, you've mentioned like the three guards of ego, poisons and antidotes. Can you give me some examples of how this would look in
Yes,
practice?
sure.
Like if someone comes in with a specific fantasy, how would you do this? How would you apply this?
Let's start with a socially sanctioned one, because people who think that they don't have sexual fantasies do, by the way. It's like dreams. Some people think, I don't have dreams. Yes, you do. So it's just that you might not be aware of them just at this point. So I haven't actually encountered anybody. Maybe there is somebody with a neurodivergence where you don't have sexual fantasies, but when you take a closer look, pretty much everyone has them. Romance, the romantic classic fairy tale of Disney, is a sexual fantasy. It's a swoon fantasy, right? This whole, I know I've got in my head a picture of hippie women wearing white wafty things in the forest.
You mean like a movie?
Saying, this is just like my visual of my imagination when I'm thinking of of this kind of fantasy of people going, oh, but I just want a man who's like this. He will just be magically so perfect that he just has his full attention on me, and he's powerful but doesn't hurt me, and he's this impossible god of romance that just happens to magically be exactly what she wants him to be, so that she can feel loved and special. She can feel like she's the only one and she's so special. And this fantasy is socially sanctioned. We say, oh, that fits our idea of how gender roles should be. So that's not a fantasy. That's how your man should be, right? It's a fantasy. Men are just humans. Men have the full spectrum of foibles and talents, and can't possibly live up to that level of manliness of this particular fantasy. But let's look at the fantasy itself. A really common one coming from that place is, let's think of heterosexual women, but it certainly can apply to anyone really. But let's just pick one where she's fantasizing about having someone be primarily ravish her. Wants to really, just consensually but primarily ravish her, because he can't, he wants her so much that his desire is gone primal for her, and he'll hold her down maybe, but in all the right ways, and he will take her, right? And he does all the doing and she gets to be receptive, right? This is the fantasy, the story. She gets to keep her status. Remember the three guards? Let's get to those now. The three guards. She gets to keep her status as the good girl who doesn't do those dirty things. That comes from him and his desire. So I'm a good girl. Oh, look, I didn't do it. I was just innocent. He ravished me in all of those dirty ways in which I really wanted. Right, so you get to protect your own identity right there and still access this place beyond the bridge in this land. And there's power play in there, right? And so the other thing that it does is it really protects your self-worth, and that is, I'm so desirable, he can't control himself. Look at how special I am. Ego is now appeased, and you can feel safe to let it down, and you can now open to just pure experiencing. Look how special I am. All fantasies do that, by the way. All fantasies make us feel like we are the specialist special that ever specialed in one way or another. Right? So, because it's trying to appease ego, and ego wants to be special. Ego wants to be precious and valuable, and status. Right? So I get to keep my status in the community. I get to be a good girl, because girls won't. If girls actively want sex and go and proactively get it, they're the bad girls. They'll get cast out of society or out of the tribe, and then you risk losing your safety in the tribe. So we need it to come from the man, so that we can feel as though we've protected that status as well. Yeah. Did that make sense? Ask questions if it didn't.
Oh, totally. No, it's making sense. I'm just thinking about my own fantasies at the same time. I'm like, oh yeah, that's interesting. Oh, you put that together there, and yep, okay. No, it makes sense. Like, I understand what you mean.
Yep.
I'm curious,
Okay,
like,
cool.
what would it be like for, that's, it's interesting thinking. It's like that's the socially sanctioned thing is just a fantasy like everything else. It's no better or worse. It's just a fantasy, whereas a lot of people think that's what you should want. If you want something else, something's wrong with you. But it's interesting is I put
That's
them